Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live episode of In Lay Terms. I'm your host, Payman Ascari, and today I'm very pleased to announce that as a guest we have Major Russ Cooper. Welcome, Major.
Hey, thanks, Payman, for the invite. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you.
Thank you for volunteering your time to come on. As I said, actually, I didn't say this, but I'm really excited when I get former military on. It makes my show feel a little bit more professional.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I do have a military background. I've got about 29 years in the military. I was a pilot. Proud to say I was a fighter pilot with the military for many years. I started out having no dreams of being in the military at all. I was born in Hamilton, Steel Town. I was all set up to be, follow my father into Stelco type thing and be a steel mill hand. But I wound up finding myself at Royal Military College because I couldn't afford to go to university. So I went the next best route and went for the scholarship route with the military college. But it wasn't really free because at the end of the day, you're obligated to serve in the military for a certain number of years. And I wound up spending 29. So I spent 29 years in the military flying. I did a lot of military training, jet fighter or jet pilot training, and then went on to fly the CF-104 Starfighter and then the CF-18. I'm honored to say I had an opportunity to serve the country in a combat position on the F-18 during the first Persian Gulf War, where I was the 2IC, the second in command of the fighter squadron that progressed to combat activities against Iraq in Kuwait and in southern Iraq. From there, I found myself, I retired after, at the tender age of 45, wound up going into civil aviation with Bombardier, and then I was there for 3 years. And then I went on to, at the tender age of 48, I joined Air Canada. And I became a pilot with Air Canada until I had to retire at age 60. And I remember the first day on the job at Air Canada, we're in a meeting room and we're getting together with course mates, introducing each other. And I had course mates coming up to me asking if I was one of the instructors. I was at that time a fairly novel entity in Air Canada, being a 48-year-old new hire. But I certainly enjoyed my time with Air Canada. Wound up flying 777s with them around the world. Had a great it was a great job flying off to places like China, Shanghai, Santiago, Chile, all over the world, over the polar cap to go to places like Hong Kong. It was just fantastic. But all good things ended. At age 60, I had to retire, so I found myself off on an engineering stint. I was a human factors engineer for some time in a Montreal avionics firm designing cockpits, and then I became a test pilot with Transport Canada, involved in certification of flight decks and flight deck systems, and then retired from that in about the time of 2015, 2016. And then found myself wandering into the field of civil liberties. I had no intention of doing so. I was just all set to retire, enjoy my grandchildren, enter my golden ages. But then our new government from 2015, the Liberal government, came up with these narratives that I found was just incredible. They told us that we were Islamophobic. They told us we were religious discriminators. They told us we were systemically racist. I thought, what the heck's going on here? And I just couldn't sit back and let these narratives fly without any kind of a counter. And so I began writing, and that's where I find myself now with an organization called Canadian Citizens for Charter Rights and Freedoms, C3RF, we like to call ourselves. And we're across the country. We have members around the world. And we talk about things like civil liberties, try to educate the public on what Canada is going through. And there's no two ways of saying it. I mean, Canada is undergoing a revolution. We're seeing the civil liberties that we took for granted, all of them being trounced and trashed as we speak, and we see it every day with legislation that's coming down from this government. So I felt like I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. So we started C3RF. That's where I am now.
That was a tremendous intro. You're going to make me look like a bumbling buffoon now. I'm tripping over my words.
Maybe a bit too long, but I am fairly long in the tooth, I guess. Yeah.
No, that was very good. I have some follow-up questions.
Go
You
ahead.
mentioned the sort of 2015 as the inflection point. That's when
Yeah.
Trudeau got elected.
Yeah.
Looking back, I now realize that there were some signs there, like SNC Lavalin was like one of them.
Yeah.
But I didn't really wake up. I was hyper focused on what was going on in the US because of 2016. And I thought America was the center of the world. And then 2020 hit. And then I was like, wait a minute, our entire country is also on fire. But like, when did you start noticing something was wrong?
It goes back quite a ways. Really, 2015 was the inflection point because the government became so brazen as to actually, confront us with our systemic racism and our Islamophobia, up front. And it was a bald-faced declaration: "You are bad." But before that, you could see things were beginning to go off the rails. And from a military standpoint, I say this, from my days in the military, I found that over time, it was more and more the warrior spirit, the whole objective of a military engaging the enemy and combating the enemy and killing him was more and more a thing that was not to be discussed. It was not where the military wanted to be. It was we're kind of a loving and caring organization. We're diverse, and I could see this unfolding through the 90s when I was involved with flying fighters, CF-18s in Germany. I came back from Germany in 1991, and the country, to me, it seemed to change. All of a sudden, I went to an National Defense Headquarters job, and all of a sudden at National Defense Headquarters, we're having these people come in, these consultants come in to talk to us about how we needed to be diverse, how we needed to be more loving and caring, how we and there that it was like we used to call them hug-a-tree sessions. You'd go in there and they teach you how to hug a tree, and then you'd walk out and go about your business. But more and more, I retired in 1997. These became more serious, and they were more, really about more and more about what the military needed to be about. And I still keep in touch with military chaps to this day, and I find that now it's gotten to the point where they actually have struggle sessions. You'll be at your desk, you'll get called up for a meeting, you'll have go to a meeting and have a struggle session, and you'll be expected to tell the audience, tell your peers, how your privilege is a bad thing, and that you promise to do better, and it goes on and on. This is struggle sessions. This is from Maoist 1960 China. This is where this is all kind of Maoist strategies and protocols being put in place in the military. And now, well, the proof is in the pudding. You look at the military now, and it's just incredible. They wonder why they have a retention and recruitment problem. It's obvious. I mean, wokeness is killing the military. Is killing the whole ethos that people like me. I joined at 17. People like me at 17 joined for. It was for the challenge. It was for defending freedom. It was for all these good things, and it wasn't for and having the freedom to wear high heels and paint your nails. Yeah, it goes back quite a ways, but I didn't say anything about it. I said this is all. I think a lot of people at the time said this is all blowing. This will blow over. This people aren't going to go along with this stuff. But you see that narrative. It kind of digs in, and it gains more and more traction as more and more people don't say anything. And as it becomes louder and louder, it takes on a whole life of its own, and all of a sudden you have a military that's woke. You have a school system that's telling you that we're not going to tell parents if your child says he wants to change his name from Ben to Betty. You have no right as a parent to know that your son is going through this transformation, this process, because we have to affirm it, and affirming it means that we can't tell you. You have all these things going on where your life is your personal life is now being intruded upon, and people are actually coming in and mucking around with your life and your family on the basis of we need to be woke. Wow, that's a hell of a way to go. And I think we talked in the before we started talking, Payman, we talked about people rising up, and now you're seeing people are saying, hey, this is gone way too far. And now we have people who are surprised because Trump has a landslide win in the States in the 2024 election. I could have told you that was going to happen, months and months before. So, and the same thing is happening now in Canada.
I hope so. I wanted to give you a little background on me. I came to Canada in '89. I was born in Iran.
Yeah.
So there was a revolution in Iran, and my family managed to get out. And when I landed here, I mean, this place was freedom. It was paradise for me. I loved it. But I noticed certain things that even I, when I was only 6 years old, realized this can't be the right thing. One was the disrespect to parents. Like, it was very common for a child, 6, 7, 8 years old, to, say a bad word about their mother. You can't do that in Iran. Like, if you do that, the other students will beat you up. So there's a sense of honor and respect. The other one was this fascination with Scandinavia. They're like, Scandinavia, they don't punish their children. There's no corporal punishment there, and they're peaceful people. So we shouldn't spank our kids. And even then, I saw it as the state coming in, and they're trying to get in between the parents and the kids.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yes,
so,
it does make sense. And in the Canadian sense, like I say, I go back a long ways. I remember being back in school, and I remember something that was another inflection point, and it was 1968, and it was something in Ontario called the Hall-Dennis Report, and it was a reformation of the public school system in Ontario. And what the Hall-Dennis report, what it prescribed was we needed to get rid of this classical liberal education that the West had been, educating its young people with for decades and centuries. And we have to go to this new methodology. They call it child-centered rearing, child-centered education, where the child gets to say what he or she wants to do, and the parents are kind of, they have to tag along, and in the effort of optimizing their child's self-actualization, the child had the better say in how it's going to be raised. And I think that speaks to you coming here in 1989 and finding that children were getting away with a lot, didn't have to respect elders. It wasn't that way in the 50s and 60s when I was a kid. It wasn't that way at all. It was like it was with you in Iran. But 1968, Hall-Dennis Report, child-centered rearing, and this whole thing in the 60s, if you look at the 60s and you talk about the sexual revolution, you talk about free love, you talk about all these things that kind of foisted themselves on our society and started developing these narratives of freedom, being able to have to do whatever you wanted to do. This whole narrative changed the way the West and Canada thought about freedom. And all of a sudden it became something a little bit different, and that narrative kind of took off. And I think that's what we're talking about when we talk about the military going through this woke process. We're talking about narratives that are imposed upon us that ultimately in the end becomes something you cannot challenge. And if you do challenge it, well, then you're a racist, you're this, you're that. You get called names, and so you have to shut up. And I think this all had its beginnings back in the 60s, and I can see it happening with our school system in 1968 with the Hall-Dennis Report. Well, that's my observation.
I have a question about that. I always wondered, what was it about? Everything went haywire in the 60s.
Yeah.
What happened? Was it that your parents' generations were exceptionally cruel and you guys went the wrong way, or was it too much money after World War II?
No, it's well, you have World War II, you have the greatest generation, fighting that war for the best of reasons, to defeat Nazi Germany, to defeat the Axis powers, and basically tyranny. All of that was good. Then you had the follow-on baby boom, where people came back from the war. They just wanted to do nothing but enjoy their lives, realize the American or the Canadian dream, have a family, and they did all that. And we had all kinds of kids in the baby boom, and then throughout that process, you had something else was going on. You were in the Soviets, in Soviet Russia, you had this thing happening where people were beginning to realize that communism doesn't work. It just as an economic construct is just leads you to poverty and depravity. So the whole idea of communism kind of got shapeshifted into instead of being a class struggle between labor and the bourgeoisie, it became a class, not a class struggle, but a struggle based on race, on religion, other differences. And we saw that kind of creep into the American scene, the Canadian scene in the 60s with organizations like the SDS that started to promulgate these ideas of free love that took hold. So it was. I don't think it was the fault of, say, the generations that fought the Second World War that had kids, had the baby boom. It was this other thing that was kind of imported into Canada, into America by organizations like the Frankfurt School. If you ever heard of that, Payman, the Frankfurt School, that had these ideas of progressing collectivism by marching through the institutions, by taking over the institutions one by one, with people who are amenable to this collectivist ideal. And they started with education, and education in the 60s came under a lot of pressure through these initiatives like child-centered rearing to change, to accommodate this collectivist, this progressive idea. It was quite successful.
Yeah, we can see the fruits of that labor.
Yeah.
You know what fascinates me? Egerton Ryerson, like in the 1800s, he brought laws that made education compulsory, and yet we didn't see this. Like we didn't see this issue with the state taking over education until, as you mentioned, the 1960s. And I'm trying to figure out what changed. Was it literally a external operation from people like the Frankfurt School?
Yeah, they were very, very powerful, very, very influential, and they were very successful in putting their people in place within the educational institutions. I would say it's not something that we asked for. Right? It was something that we were open to, and it took hold. And I guess you can say that you have this old adage where you say, weak men create weak societies. Strong men create hard societies, and we have that. I guess after World War II, where people kind of laid back, pursuing their own American or Canadian dreams, we allowed our culture to fade to things. We decided that it was better to lay back a bit, and I guess we kind of moved away from what used to be a Judeo-Christian ethic that was very strong. That was very strong in the Western world, and allowed it to become an afterthought. And once you do that, then you allow other thoughts to come to the fore, and that's where I think we left ourselves open to these influences that took hold, and were very persistent, and are with us very, very strongly to this day.
Uh, Recently in Quebec, there's been calls to incorporate Sharia law into the society, and here in BC, a a board member from the police department, she got let go because she made some comments negative of Diwali. She said like they're getting Christianity out of schools, but then there's Diwali everywhere.
Yeah.
Uh, when you mentioned Judeo-Christian values and how we've abandoned them, what do those values mean to you, and how did they manifest in Canadian society in like the 50s and 60s?
I think that whole ethic was very could be very simply put in in terms of the golden rule. Treat others as you would have them treat you, and that the whole Western concept is that Judeo-Christian concept is to I guess excuse me give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and then take care on a personal basis your own salvation type thing. There was a separation of church and state. That was part of it. The other part of it was this golden rule: treat others as you'd have them treat you. And from that devolves the whole concept of rule of law. And rule of law is all about okay, we have a law in place, and everyone is subject to the same law. So it doesn't matter if you're the prime minister or the guy at the steel mill. You all have can expect to be treated equally under the law, and each individual is treated as an individual who has rights that aren't guaranteed or provided by the state. They are provided by a higher authority. So right there, you have encapsulated the whole concept of Westernism, which is all about the individual having inalienable rights. That the state can't fool around with or take or dispense on the basis of what it feels whether you should have them or not. And that whole concept kind of has gone away, has been vaporized by this post-national, this postmodern movement, which came to us from the 60s, from the Frankfurt School. Basically as collectivism, just wrapped up in a different shroud and presented to the Western world back in the 60s. And so you have this new postmodern theory where there's no real truth. There's Judeo-Christian ethics. There's no real truth in that. Truth is a relative thing, and any other way of looking at life through another ideology or belief system is just as valid as that Judeo-Christian concept. So, there's no you can't say that anyone is better than the other, and so then now all of a sudden you set up the whole premise where if you do speak out against, say, another belief system or ideology, well then you're out of line, and you can't do that. So you get punished and you get censored. And we see that on a daily basis today in Canada. You cannot discuss certain things. You cannot discuss Sharia, because if you do, then you're Islamophobic. You cannot discuss basically anything that the state doesn't want you to discuss, because you're out of line. And so you get censored, you get pummeled, you get sent off to the slammer. We have the case in Canada now where if you protest against protesters who are supporting Hamas and terrorism, then you get thrown in jail. I'm looking at the case of Ezra Levant within the past week or so, where he got thrown in the slammer, whereas the people who are firebombing synagogues and putting bullets through Jewish public schools, they're out on bail, or they don't get caught, and they don't go to jail. So you have this: if you speak out against what the state wants you to believe, you go to jail, and you're the problem. And so that's where we find ourselves now. And it's just an incredible setup where up is down and black is white. So everything has been reversed on us, type thing, and we find ourselves in a very confused state.
So that was amazing. I'm gonna clip that out, and I'm gonna put that on social media.
Okay.
And I've asked people to explain it to me. No one's explained it that well. I have a dumbed down version. I tell people like people are kind of like chess pieces, and I put this mirror above them, and they reflect off that mirror. That's called the rule of law. Everyone's treated equally, and to me, that's the sovereignty of the individual. Nothing is above that mirror. But now the government is coming in and saying, no, 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 we're above that mirror. Whatever we say goes. And to me,
Yes.
that's no different than the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Yes, exactly. It's the same concept. It's the state. The state is God, and the state knows best. You are a minion. You are a serf. You are a slave, and you have no right to do to pursue your own happiness, because it's the happiness of the state that needs to be pursued uh, at all costs. And it's just that simple. It is tyranny. It is dictatorship. And I'm afraid that the Canada that I actually went to war for, the Canada I thought I was fighting for, a free and democratic Canada, a Western liberal democracy that was kicking a tyrant out of Kuwait. I was quite proud to do that. But now I look back on it, and would I do that now and for today's Canada? No, I would not. I would not. I would not put myself forward, take that kind of a risk for a country that tells me that I'm the problem. No. And I think that's right there. You capsulize right there why they can't recruit and they can't retain.
I was going to say, I don't think anybody would blame you. Like if you sacrifice your life for your country, if you feel that you have a place in that country, not if you're a slave.
Yeah, yeah, unless you're forced to. And maybe that's where we're going next. I don't know with Canada, but there you have it.
You touched on another thing. You called it the Canadian dream. 50s, 60s, 1940s, 1950s. What would you say the Canadian dream was?
Oh, I think in my mind, the Canadian dream is to be left alone and to be able to pursue your own life and your own life dreams with as little interference as possible. The Canadian dream is to be left free to worship as you will, as you choose, and to going back to the golden rule, treat others as you'd have them treat you. Work to better your community, to better your family, to better your community, to better your country. In that priority, or in that sequence, is what I would see a Canadian dream to be. Nothing fancy. Just leave me alone, and let me pursue my own happiness.
I have a question about earlier you tied Christianity, a Judeo-Christian West, into basically the rule of law, the West. My question is, to what degree should we be tolerant, and when should we be intolerant? Like when we're letting so many people in, I'm talking about mass immigration, where
Oh
now
yeah,
you're threatening the actual foundation, the rule of law.
yeah.
Is there a point where you say, this is the line you should not cross?
Well, I think there should be. You should take care to preserve, that nature of a country, whatever that nature might be. You should take care to ensure that it's not overrun, that it's that you act responsibly when you consider bringing folks in. We bring folks in. We're a country of immigrants, but there has to be some sort of an overwatch of just how many and who is coming in. I think our current government has failed miserably at that. They're not. I don't think they're vetting people properly. I think it all started in 2015 when the government of that day said we're going to bring in 50,000 Syrians. I mean that's a lot of people at one whack, and they were told by their immigration officials. I remember seeing the reports that this is, we're going to have a hard time handling this kind of an influx, and vetting everybody. And no, we're going to do it. Let's go for it. We'll contract third parties to do the vetting process, and it was a disaster. And it didn't stop there. We didn't learn any lessons, and so we continued. But really, this wasn't really a Canadian phenomenon. This was this was across the West. We saw in the same time frame, 2015. Angela Merkel in Germany opened the gates of Germany, and they were the refugees, Middle Eastern, North African personnel came pouring into the country at huge rates, and it became a problem, and it became a criminal problem, and became a security problem. We had terrorist attacks, but still lessons were not learned, and so it tells me that. Even now, we're seeing Britain, allowing Britain and Ireland allowing huge inflows of people coming in on boats crossing the Channel from France, unobstructed, no problem, and we're seeing it's like it's planned. This is government sponsored, and I think it's pretty hard to get away from that kind of a conclusion, given the numbers, given the red flags that have been risen because of people coming in and creating security concerns, crime concerns, and still we're doing it. So I think it's pretty obvious that it's a government-sponsored plan, and it's wreaking havoc. And I'm here in Ottawa right now, and there's big people are getting very, very distraught over sprung shelters being put up that are going to house single people coming from overseas who are refugees, and they're going to plunk these sprung shelters in, and they're going to be able to house hundreds of people, and they're going to be plunked down in the middle of neighborhoods and communities, and you look at what's happening in places like Ireland, where they have these same shelters being built up, big shelters, to house what basically are single men who have left their families of military age in what ostensibly look like barracks. So people are looking at this saying, what are you doing? What is going on? We've got looks like you're importing war fighters into our communities, and and it was kind of funny, but in the Ottawa sense, they had news reports, and people were getting up to the microphone saying, what the heck is going on here? And the whole program, the meeting was set up so that you couldn't ask questions. If you wanted to ask a question, you had to stand on the line, and the line apparently was populated by people who were pro immigration at any cost, and the people who were against what was going on, they couldn't get up to the microphone to ask questions. So they had one chap. He ran up on the stage, and he began yelling, no tents in our city, no tents in our city, because they weren't allowing him to have a say. So people are getting pretty desperate to get their voice in now. And but really, this has gone way too far. And you talk about going to the point where you're importing military age fighting age men into communities. I mean, it's incredibly stupid, but it looks like it has to be some sort of a plan. That's my opinion.
When my father came here and he brought his family, the immigration law was basically you have to prove that you can support your family, and you have to prove that where you're going to get a job. And if you can't do that at any point, we're going to kick you back out.
Yeah. I'm
gonna share some ideas I have for why people seemingly don't care and immigration has gotten so bad. One is the destruction of the family unit and this whole fascination with one's career. So you don't, a million people coming in doesn't impact you as long as you can get a job. The other one is urbanization. Like, it's very transient. You don't even know your neighbors. I don't know. Those are the two that come to mind. What else do you think is driving this?
Oh, I think you're bang on. I think urbanization and densification, really. When you pack people into a space, and the way we do now, it it takes neighbors further and further away from each other. You know, a little bit of a contravention there, but in terms, but you know, you get that whole aspect of knowing your neighbor and building a community with your neighbor gets lost when you get urbanized to the point where everyone looks to the state for the benefits, for for making the community work instead of the individual families. That urbanization is a big factor. But destruction of the family unit, that has probably got to be the biggest deal going, because it seems like family has been is under attack by a variety of sources. Maybe one of the largest ones being just social media. Just our interconnectivity is bombarding children, and I think it's really difficult. When my wife and I were having our family back in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't so hard to keep track of what the kids were up to, and but nowadays I really can see it being a very, very difficult task for a parent to keep track of what's going on, given all of the messages and signaling that's hitting their kids as they go to school, as they look at their phones, as they interconnect with this world that basically tells them in no uncertain terms that family isn't such a good thing, that maybe the way to go is to be like Taylor Swift, or maybe the way to go is to be provocative, and peer pressure becomes the order of the day. So family unity, family connectedness is certainly a thing that we find ourselves giving us a big problem. Yeah.
So your organization is called C3RF?
Yeah, Canadian Citizens for Charter Rights and Freedoms, yes. Yeah.
So you use the phrase civil rights, charter rights, God-given rights. What does that mean to you, and what are the ones that are important to you?
The fundamental rights, we home in on the fundamental rights, Section 2 of the Charter, which guarantees the right to freedom of speech, religion, assembly, association. Those fundamental rights, we believe, are called fundamental for a good reason, because they are the rights that all other rights depend on. If they're going to work, if they're going to be there, you can't have any other right within the Charter unless you have your ability to speak freely and criticize and discuss and debate. What your state, what your country is doing on your behalf. So the important ones are those fundamental rights that more and more seem to be in competition with other rights, and our courts have said as much when they say that their job is to balance rights, one against the other. So they say, well, we have a fundamental right here with speech, but we have to balance that against the other equality rights, like, now transgenderism has become kind of a Section 15 equality right. And now you have a situation where that equality right, gender expression and identity, can't be debated. It can't be argued. You can't talk about it. So your freedom of speech is balanced against it and is balanced away. So as a matter of fact, it's so bad that when it comes to freedom of speech, these gender rights tell you that your speech can be compelled. You have to, if that person wants you to call them a cat or a dog, then you've got to call them a cat or a dog, because they have those gender identity and expression rights that now override your right to free speech. So that's the point where we are in Canada right now. We're at the point where our fundamental rights have been obliterated by these other rights that are being read into the Charter by courts made up of 9 people who are unelected. That's where we are right now.
Correct me if I'm wrong. This concept of rights, it's like a jurisdictional issue, right? You're saying to the government, this is the jurisdiction of God, essentially. What I think, what I believe, what's in my head, what I think is up or down, right or wrong, that's between me and God or me and my creator.
Yeah.
You stay the hell out. Now the
Yeah.
government's saying, no, no, no. This concept of rights, somebody has to have the responsibility to guarantee those rights, which originally, again, it meant guarantee those rights to make sure government doesn't infringe. But now government's saying I have to infringe to guarantee those rights, and you get this trans rights and equality.
Yeah, and it's up as down, black as white type of thing, because the charter, our rights are the charter is there to protect our rights from government overreach. That was the whole purpose. The whole intent was for the charter to protect us from the government. And now the government is turned it all around and said, oh, no, we're here to protect your rights. And we might have to do this, that, or the other thing to make sure that we might have to penalize you somehow because we need to protect your rights. It's a total debasement of the original intent of the charter. I've had many good discussions about this with Brian Peckford. Now, here's the last living first minister responsible for taking for drafting and patriating our charter. And he tells me in no uncertain terms that his intent and the intent of the people who drafted the charter was to protect the individual from the government, not the other way around. But you notice that Brian doesn't get much of an audience in Canada. You don't have a CTV or CBC running to him to ask him for his opinion. As a matter of fact, I think they run away from him. They don't want to hear his opinion. Brian has taken certain court cases, travel mandate, vaccine mandate cases, to the Supreme Court, only to be told that no, you've got it all wrong. They've disallowed these particular cases on the point of mootness. They know your concerns about your rights are no longer apply. Oh, because the government has decided to suspend these vaccine mandates, so it's that the whole question is moot. We don't need to discuss your concerns. As an original drafter of the Constitution and the Charter, we don't have to address your concerns. So please go away. It is really kind of embarrassing. It's very embarrassing. But there you have it. You talk about the government protecting our rights. Now it's gotten so bad that we have Bill C-63, which was on the table until very recently. It looks like they're going to split the bill in two, but the original Bill C-63, called Online Harms Act, was set up so that not only could you be punished for things that you say, but it was set up so that anonymous persons could go to a commissioner of this digital commission and could say that they think you might be about to say something. You might say something that is not proper. So the commissioner, the digital commission, can turn around and can confine you to your own house, can put you under house arrest, can take you off the internet, can put an ankle bracelet on you because you might say something down the road. Now that's even beyond Orwellian. That's even beyond 1984. At least in 1984, they would put you in a slammer for something you said or something you argued with. But now they can actually subject you to penalties for something you might think of saying. This is truly dystopian, and this is where Canada is today. And it's absolutely incredible that we've allowed ourselves to slide down to this kind of level of serfdom. Really, is what we need to call it.
So, Major, it's too early in the morning for you to get me angry over Bill 63. I'll bring you back on another time.
I can try.
That bill, don't get me started. I've read the whole thing. It's just, there's nothing good. The only good thing is the prevention of virtual child pornography.
But that's already covered.
Yeah, that too. So yeah, you're right. There's nothing good in there.
No.
What I was going to ask you, Major, have you run for office? Have you talked to the voters?
Oh, no. Like I say, a couple of years ago, I was sailing off into my golden years, and I was just going to be enjoying my grandchildren. So, no, I've just been wrapped up in doing the best I can to try to educate Canadians what I see coming down the pike, about the dystopia that I see, Canada's descending into. I've had a couple of people actually come up to me and say, "Well, have you considered running?" And um, but nothing serious like that. No, no.
Well, consider it. You would make a really good politician because you have a lot of life experience and you're a good communicator.
That's
What?
but a
Huh?
politician these days. You say a good politician, you have to define politician because, in my mind, and I think in your mind, a good politician is one that really strives to represent his people, to give his people a voice, to give the people who voted for him a voice. But you look at politicians that are serving us now, and I don't think that's their definition. I think their definition is to keep their political party
Yeah.
in power. That's their definition, and I could never be part of that because I just wouldn't fit. And uh, I give you credit and people like yourself, um, and Max Bernier. I've had discussions with Max, who really are doing the best they can to change that, and I think it needs to be changed. And I'm wishing you all the luck in the world.
Yeah, we need to come up with a new term like citizen politician or patriot servant, something. But
Yes, yes, yes.
putting that aside for now, the what I when you're running for a public office, you get to talk to the voters, and some of the things I see absolutely shock me. So, this concept of rights, God-given rights, when you talk to people, principally on the left, they will say, without government, there are no rights because government is there to secure your rights. So
Okay.
therefore, government can take your rights away. And they don't understand the argument, our perspective, the one I just made. The purpose of rights is a jurisdiction issue. It's rights against, free from the government to keep the government out.
Yes. Yeah. It goes back to it's been established for what 8 centuries now. It goes back to I guess you could say it goes back thousands of years, but the individual having his own special worth, his own special dignity as an individual goes back a long while. I guess it was codified in England back in 1215 with the Magna Carta, and there it was very specific. It was, there was the whole concept of free men was put down on paper, and a free man had the right to due process under the law. He had the right to be judged by his peers. All these things go back 800 years or so. So it's not a new thing, and the fact that people don't understand that in a Western liberal democracy really says that we've got a big education problem. And this is, another thing I've seen happen with respect to education was when I was a kid in school in the 50s and 60s. I mean, we learned about history. We learned about how the West, came to be. We learned about all the explorers, Magellan, all the Drake. We learned about how all those people, made the West what the West is today. But now I don't think you get that in schools these days. I don't think you get, any lessons on civics. We see lessons on civics as well, but that doesn't seem to be part of the curriculum anymore. That needs to be changed.
Yeah, this interdependence on one another, but specifically the state, it's caused some really nasty things. So, like 50 years ago, I used to, not 50, 35 years ago, I used to go to Turkey, from Canada, we go to Turkey to meet with my family. And you get out of the airport, and there's people there, you get a driver, you pay the driver cash, so sovereignty. The driver would drive you around. There was no internet then. The Airbnb sort of thing was you go to a house, it's got a sign, the lady comes out on the balcony, the owner, and you negotiate with them a rate. This is not taxes. This is not government. This is not paperwork. Right now, the government is involved in every activity in our lives.
Yes. Yeah. And it's becoming more and more so. You see with these initiatives, and I think they all seem to be coming together in some sort of a plan. But you with digital ID, with essentially central bank digital currencies, with 15-minute cities, all these initiatives, treaties, World Health Organization treaties that Canada is signing on to. Apparently, all these things are coming together to give the state input into every aspect of your life, and There's no room left for a person to be free, to be an individual and pursue his own dreams, because he's got all these other state mandates that have to be looked after as a number one priority. And that's serfdom. We're headed down the road to slavery with all this stuff. And unless the citizen politician, or whatever you want to call him, gets control of this, we're in a deep world of hurt. It's a world that, quite frankly, I don't see myself being happy in. But.
Yeah, I agree that this is top down, but it's also bottom up. Like you said, it's an education problem.
Yeah.
People, I always say, like, we don't have healthcare in Canada. We have health insurance, the single payer model. The government's it's got a monopoly on health insurance. But people think that if we got rid of the government, healthcare would disappear, like splitting the atom, and the atom no longer exists.
Yeah.
That's what they actually believe.
Yeah, I know you talk about healthcare. I'd go one step further. I would say that we don't have a healthcare system. We have a health rationing system. And it's anything that the government touches, it turns into a system of rationing. You leave the government in control of anything, and you're going to end up having to plead with it to get your portion of whatever they're offering, whether it be healthcare or food or whatever. There's just two ways about it. I mean, the government. Look at if you want to look at healthcare gone off the rails. You can look at how we handled I call it the Wuhan virus pandemic. How we promised to flatten the curve in a couple of weeks, and it turned into about 2 or 3 years of lockdown and mandated vaccines. That was Orwellian, and that was totally uncalled for, especially given the data and the information that was known up front about how the disease itself worked, and how if you were younger, you didn't have to put yourself in a position where you were locked down to save your life, because it was a disease. If you look at it, it was a disease of the elderly and the institutionalized. That was the problem, and those problems were never addressed. Never.
Silver lining, a lot of people are waking up, not because they regret what they did, but they see the damage they've done to their economy, which means their pocketbooks.
Yes, when it hits home, people all of a sudden take notice, and we saw this with we saw this with we spent $500 billion extra. We went into debt, $500 billion in Canada to lock ourselves down, to pay people who weren't working anymore, to basically destroy our economy. And we pumped all that money into the system, and now we're surprised that we've got inflation.
Who would have thought? Yeah.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought that pumping $500 billion into the economy for no effect, no reason, no economic benefit, was going to wind up having lots of money, dollars slosh around the economy and create inflation? And now we have this inflation creates mortgage rates that are unsustainable to people who had mortgages at 1%, 2%, 3%. Now they got mortgages at 5%, 6%, 7%, 8%. They can't afford them, and now it's hitting home. And now they're understanding. They're beginning to see, maybe this wasn't such a good idea, and now they're starting to squawk. Well, that it's good. It's good that they're squawking because it's a long time coming.
I saw the writing on the wall when I saw the government going crazy. The first thing I did is I liquidated all my assets, even at a bit of a loss. I had a house, and I'm like, I am not going to pay the property tax, because the premier of BC, he froze the rent hikes. Okay, fine. I mean, I can understand why you want to do that, but then he didn't freeze the property tax. I'm like, I don't want to have an investment where the premier is basically bankrupting me year after year.
Yeah.
And I sold my house and I moved my money out of the country.
Yeah. Well, there were some people who saw up front that this whole Wuhan virus pandemic was just didn't make sense. I mean, I looked at it and they told me that these vaccines are safe and effective, but we have no long-term trials. Well, I looked at that and I said, well, wait a minute. How can they be safe and effective if you don't have long-term trials? So you don't know if they're safe and effective in the long term. Oh no, they're safe and effective, and they're so safe and effective that we're going to mandate you can't have a job if you don't have these safe and effective vaccines. Well, right there, I said there's something that's terribly wrong here. But I think when they look at the numbers, and this is kind of a constant, steady number, 10%. When you look at fooling all of the people all the time, or some of the people some of the time, there's a 10% in any society, in any population, that are going to look twice at anything you try to shove down their throats. And I think we see that 10% in Canada. We're basically that's kind of the number that showed up that said they didn't want to get vaccinated, and they became the misogynists. They became the fringe. They became the truckers that had to have the Emergencies Act declared against them, because they wanted to talk about it. And it got to the point where you couldn't even talk about it. If you wanted to talk about it, if you wanted to dialogue with your politicians, with your prime minister in Ottawa, you couldn't do it. You got martial law declared on you, and you got your bank account frozen. Wow. I mean, that's kind of a sure sign of we've entered into a dystopian state, I would say.
So the 10% you're talking about, this is one thing. If you figure out the common theme among us, please let me know. But it's different race, different religion, different gender, different circumstance, different career.
Doesn't matter.
And I can't figure out what it is that makes us special.
Yeah. No, I think I've read some papers on it. There's some work on it. There was a lady in Australia. She's a psychologist. She did a paper on it, and she looked into it, and she thought that it might be people with certain types of backgrounds, upbringings. It might be people who who weren't treated that well when they were brought up, and they and therefore they grew either a thicker skin, or they grew a certain reticence to just go along with whatever the authorities were telling them to do. But I don't know. She had some thoughts on. I know there's been some work on that to try to discover just what makes this 10% tick. And but it's there. Doesn't matter the age group, population, race, creed, or religion. Doesn't matter. It's just it's common to humanity. They say 80% of the people will kind of go along, and they'll trust you. They'll follow you off the edge of the cliff. There they go. But there's 10% there, 10-20% that think twice before they step off the edge, and follow you. But
well, God bless them. Yeah.
God bless them. Yeah, because without them, I mean, what they say, my readings on it it's this 10% that they go through a rough time. They're pilloried. They're disparaged, but they persist, and there comes an inflection point where all of a sudden that 10% begins to be listened to by the other 80%, and that's at that inflection point. That's when things start to turn, and I think. I really believe that we've kind of reached that point now. I think we've seen it. We've seen it as early as 2016 with Brexit, with the initial election of Trump. I think that was part of it. People were understanding that there was something that the 10% had right, and maybe we should listen to them. And it's interesting to note that from 2015, 2016, we had mass influx of migration flows from North Africa, from the Middle East. People started to get a little bit worried about these things. And then 2016, with the end result was Brexit, that kicked off Brexit. And then in 2016, you see the powers of the state when it comes to censorship, controlling of information. You saw it turn from looking outwards at foreign affairs. It turned that whole censorship industry turned inwards and became a domestic thing, and all of a sudden it became a crime, a cyber crime. If you spoke out against certain state initiatives, you were deemed to be a criminal because you were breaking. You were on the internet. You're tweeting things that you weren't supposed to tweet. Well, now you've entered that whole game of cyber criminality. That's how the censorship state set itself up. So it justified itself to look inwards and declare. Well, in the States, we had parents being declared terrorists because they questioned the trans agenda in their schools. Remember that? It was actually Merrick Garland penned a letter saying that these people are terrorists. The FBI have to take a look at them. This whole censorship industry was turned inwards and looked domestically. In Canada, we've seen the same thing. God forbid if you speak out against vaccinations, because then our own prime minister would call you misogynist and part of the fringe that shouldn't be listened to. So we had the same thing here, and we were lockstep with other initiatives in Europe, in the States. Canada was lockstep with them in using disinformation as the new weapon of choice to take hold of the information landscape, and to punish anybody who didn't comply with the narratives that they were pumping out at us. Very, very interesting. And the whole 2015, 2016 inflection point, I think, is something that deserves study, and it will be studied down the road in the future. There's an individual in the States. His name is Michael Benz.
I love that guy. It's Mike Benz Cyber.
He is on top of this, and this is. He details how this industrial censorship industry works.
What is it? He calls it the blob.
The blob. It's the blob, and it's just all these various entities that find support with each other. NGOs. Actually, we're at the point now where governments are funding NGOs that are turning around and destroying, or working against our own society. We have governments supporting NGOs who are funding people to come up from South America, Mexico, through the American border. That's all. They don't get there by happenstance. They're supported. They have food. They have vehicles. They have cell phones with applications that are dedicated to telling them where to go to get food. It's all very, very organized. And it's all being funded by NGOs, who in turn are being funded by governments. Again, government plan.
So that example you gave about that microphone that people couldn't get up to talk because there was too many pro-immigration, probably a lot of those guys were funded by the government.
Yeah, well, it was. It got. The guy, the counselor who set it up. It was so obvious that he had set this thing up so that he would only have people who were pro these sprung shelters being able to speak, that he had to relent in the end and promise that he would have another town hall where he would allow people to ask questions, because people they were not having this, not being able to voice their concerns.
So, Major, I'm going to leave you with a figure. Our combined budget for federal and provincial is about $1 trillion. The amount of money that the government gives in charitable grants, so basically to NGOs, is $240 billion. So almost 25% of our tax dollars are being used. It's not always used against us, but like some of it goes to churches, some goes to mosques, some goes to temples, some go to restaurants. So a lot of this goes to these LGBTQ initiatives. Yeah,
well, it all goes back to I mentioned earlier about these collectivists, the Frankfurt School. Engineering the march to the institutions. Well, that march has been quite successful. They've got their people in all of these institutions that control things like money and power, and it's no wonder that that much money, 25%, you say, is going to fund these groups that are in lockstep with what these collectivists want to do. So our institutions have been compromised, have been corrupted. I'd say they've been captured. And it's going to take a lot of work to right things, because they are dug in and embedded quite deeply. They are like parasites, like ticks that have really burrowed deep into the fabric of our society.
I use the phrase cancer. They've spread like a cancer.
Parasites, cancer. Anyway, not good things. Anyway,
Yeah.
not anything you want to have.
Major, we're past the 1 hour mark. I was wondering if you could maybe tell the audience where they could follow you, where they could watch your podcast.
Yeah, go to CanadianCitizens.org, www.canadiancitizens.org. We have our webpage there with all the. I do an update. I try to do it on a weekly basis, just to outline, the things that are that should concern Canadians about their civil liberties over the course of the past week, and they can see all of those updates there. They can see our videos. I do what I call in hot video sessions with people like yourself, like I had Max Bernier on, Brian Peckford, John Carpe, people who are involved with the civil liberties aspects of Canadian society. They can see our videos there, and I remember thinking when I started writing updates, I thought, what the heck am I going to write on a fairly regular basis? Like it's hard to come up with these things. But I found every week there's some new attack on our civil liberties that is absolutely incredible, and no one's talking about, because the legacy media is not going to talk about any of this stuff. So I try to outline, what's going on and what people should be thinking about, what they should be concerned about, and these updates. And I'm never at a loss for addressing a new attack on our rights and freedoms. Never.
I guess you should write a thank you letter to Justin Trudeau for giving you content regularly.
He's keeping my column going. Let me tell you, he's every week he comes up with something really stupid.
The gift that keeps on giving. Major Cooper, I had a blast having a conversation with you, and thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, it was an honor. Thanks very much for inviting me, Payman. It was a real pleasure.
Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.